Hello, on this video I'm going to talk about SQL injection. This is going to be a very detailed explanation on how the SQL injection works. I'm going to show you the problem, the database, and also how to fix this. So this is the database I'm going to be working with. And if I go right here to my tables, I created a very simple table that only has 3 columns, the user ID, the passwords, and a ID. This is a very simple table. The whole point is not to make a strong table, but to show you how the SQL injection works. And also, I already put some data here just for testing purpose. Let's look on the code. I'm definitely not going to go very deep on the code. I'm just going to go straight to the point. But here I have a page where the user enters a username and password. Then I go to a controller where I query the database. And then if the login went well, it gives you success. Otherwise, it gives you a fail. And then after that, it goes to a second page and then just display the status right here. So this is very simple. I'm going to run this program once just to see what happens here. So it's a very simple form. So here's a username and here's a password. Then click on submit, go to a second page, and then if it found those credentials in the database, it puts success. And then if it did not find, it prints fail. And the goal here is for us to do a SQL injection to bypass this login without having the credentials. I'm going to put a stop right here. And then I'm going to run a debugger just to see what kind of query we're executing. So I'm going to copy the value of this query. And then I'm going to paste on Notepad. So Notepad, I have here the query that I'm executing. So I'm selecting the ID from the table, and then the where is the important part here. So user ID is a column, and password is also a column from the database, which will be this column here, user ID, and the password. And then Jane is the value that I typed in on the form, and then ABC1234 is also the value that I typed in. So this value and this value here are what the user is typing in. I'm going to get this query and I'm going to take to the database now. So this is the query that the page is running against the database to check if the credentials are valid or not. So I'm going to execute this query, and then you can see here it returns 4 because 4 is the ID where Jane and the password ABC123 matches. So I'm going to run both queries here so you always have the entire database here. So when I run this query here, I get the 4, and I know the 4 belongs to Jane and then ABC1234. So the where statement here, we return true if this expression and this expression is true. But we can change this expression just by changing the input that comes from the form. So I'm going to comment out this query, and then I'm going to paste a new query here, and then I'm going to start changing this query. So right here, this is the input that comes from the form, and this one comes from the form as well. So I'm going to change this input here in a way that I can make this Boolean all true. So I can put another single quote here. Then I'm going to put or, and then 1 equals 1. And then after that, I'm going to comment it out the rest of the query. So doing this way here, I'm sure going to return true all the time because I'm putting an OR here, and 1 will always be equals 1, and whatever comes after that will be commented out. So I'm going to run this again, and then when I run this query here, I get all the IDs from the database. So the secret right here then is to get the user ID and then put exactly this string to bypass the fact that we do not know the username and password for this user. So now I'm going to take this back to the form, and then I'm going to run this code again, and let's try to input exactly that string right here on the form. So the single quote, and that's to close whatever username is, then OR 1 equals 1 because no matter what it will always return true, and then these 2 dashes is to comment out the rest of the query, and then the password, it doesn't really matter what we put. So I'm going to click on submit, and it gives me success. So this is the way you do a SQL injection to bypass a login when you do not have a username and password. Now, when you're trying this from the front, you do not know what's happening behind the scenes. I showed you everything from the database and also from the query that the code is executing. So there is no way to know from the front end if that's going to work or not. You just need to try. Now, I know that this database is Microsoft SQL, and because of that, I know that this is a comment, and I know this is acceptable. Now, if you don't know what database that you are attacking, then you might have to try different queries right here to make sure whatever you're doing happens. For example, you might change the comment from this to this. That might be the comment from some other database, or might be a hash as well, and that's for MySQL. Or if you're using access, if I'm not wrong, is this character for comments. So depending on the database that you're attacking, you're going to use a different query. All right, so let's take a look on the fix now. So here is the part where I receive the data coming from the client. Now the rule number one here is never trust the data coming from the client. So whatever it's coming from the client, assume it's always bad data. Assume it's malicious data. And over here, I want to put a regex code to sanitize the data that's coming from the client. Now, it's crazy important right here. This sanitization is not the solution for everything. This is only one example, and I'm excluding a quote or 2 dashes here. So this regex is matching a quote or 2 dashes. So this is a blacklist. A blacklist is very inefficient. So you should be using a whitelist. But even if you're using the whitelist, I doubt you're going to be able to create a whitelist strong enough to stop everything and still make your application usable. So this is only to help you. This is not the solution. So this regex just looks for these 2 characters set here, and then if it matches, in my case here, I'm just gonna send a "you are so funny" string to the page, and then I stop executing this code. So let's try this. So Jane, ABC1234, submit, it works. I'm gonna try again. Then I'm gonna try the hack. Then click on submit, and then the page knows that I'm trying to do something and prints "you're so funny." All right, so this helps, but this is not the solution. Don't trust on this only. The first most important thing is for us not to use this concatenation method when building your query, because this is crazy dangerous. You should always use a parameterized query. And to use the parameterized query, we're not going to concatenate the values here. What we're going to be doing is removing this concatenation. And then I'm going to create a variable here. And then I'm going to remove this concatenation again. And I'm going to create a variable here again. And then after you create the variable, and then after you create the command, you set the values into the variable. By doing so, no matter what value comes from the client, it will be part of the query, but as a parameter instead of actually building the query right here. So this makes your code very safe against SQL injection. Now, this is a great solution, but that's not the best solution. The best solution is for you to use a store procedure on your database. I'm not going to go into in-depth explanation of the store procedure because this solution is very good. But whenever possible, always use a store procedure instead of parameterized query. Those are faster and definitely better than anything else. Alright, so to test this, I'm going to comment out the regex here so I can let the SQL injection to pass through. And I'm going to run it and see if it works. So Jane, that works. Now I'm going to try with the hack. Click on submit and it fails. And again, it fails because the values do not get concatenated to form the query. The values come in as a parameter. And once they come in as a parameter, no matter what you put here, it will not affect the entire query. It will affect only where you're replacing the parameter with the value. Now let's take a quick look on the database. If I come to my database and if I go to programmability and right here in the store procedure, if I do a right click and click on store procedure, this is where I can create a store procedure to use on the code. So this is a lot safer. I'm not going to go into details because that's not the whole point of this video. And the other thing you should be doing is to give the least amount of privileges for the user that's using your database. All right, so just to recap, the solution is to sanitize user input, but remember, never trust this 100% and make sure you do a whitelist instead of a blacklist. Always use parameterized query. This is a great solution. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10 solution. But a store procedure would be a 10 out of 10 solution here. And always give the least amount of database privileges for the users that you are using on your front ends. And the last thing you can do to make your database and your website very safe is to like and subscribe to this video. Alright, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.